Preparing yourself to survive alone. Your mission as a person in a survival situation is to stay alive. As you can see, you will experience various thoughts and emotions. These can work for you, or they can work against you to your downfall. Fear, anxiety, anger, frustration, guilt, depression, and loneliness are all possible reactions to the many stresses common to lone survival. When controlled in a healthy way, these reactions will help increase the likelihood of surviving. They prompt the survivor to pay more attention in training, to fight back when scared, to take actions that ensure sustenance and security, to keep the faith, and to strive against large odds. When the survivor cannot control these reactions in a healthy way, they can bring them to a standstill. Instead of rallying their internal resources, the lone survivor listens to their internal fears. This person experiences psychological defeat long before they physically succumb. Remember, survival is natural to everyone. Being unexpectedly thrust into the life and death struggle of survival is not. Don't be afraid of your natural reactions to this unnatural situation. Prepare yourself to rule over these reactions so they serve your ultimate interest, staying alive with the honor and dignity associated with being a lone survivor. It involves preparation to ensure that your reactions in a survival setting are productive, not destructive. The challenge of survival has produced countless examples of heroism, courage, and self-sacrifice. These are the qualities it can bring out in you if you have prepared yourself. Next area, a few tips to help prepare yourself psychologically for survival. Through attending and practicing survival training, you can develop the survival attitude. Fear is our emotional response to dangerous circumstances that we believe have the potential to cause death, injury, or illness. This harm is not just limited to physical damage. The threat to one's emotional and mental well-being can generate fear as well. For the lone survivor trying to survive, fear can have a positive function if it encourages them to be cautious in situations where recklessness could result in injury. Unfortunately, fear can also immobilize a person. It can cause them to become so frightened that they fail to perform activities essential for survival. Most people will have some degree of fear when placed in unfamiliar surroundings under adverse conditions. There is no shame in this. Each person must train themselves not to be overcome by fear. Ideally, through realistic training, we can acquire the knowledge and skills needed to increase our confidence and thereby manage our fears. Anxiety associated with fear is anxiety. Because it is natural for us to be afraid, it is also natural for us to experience anxiety. Anxiety can be an uneasy, apprehensive feeling we get when faced with dangerous situations, physical, mental, and emotional. When used in a healthy way, anxiety urges us to act to end, or at least master, the dangers that threaten our existence. If we were never anxious, there would be little motivation to make changes in our lives. The lone survivor in a survival setting reduces his anxiety by performing those tasks that will ensure his coming through the ordeal. As they reduce anxiety, the lone survivor is also bringing under control the source of that anxiety, his fears. In this form, anxiety is good. However, anxiety can also have a devastating impact. Anxiety can overwhelm a person to the point where they become easily confused and has difficulty thinking. Once this happens, it becomes more and more difficult for him to make good judgments and sound decisions. To survive, the person must learn techniques to calm his anxieties and keep them in the range where they help, not hurt. Anger and frustration. Frustration arises when a person is continually thwarted in his attempts to reach a goal. The goal of survival is to stay alive until you can reach help, or until help can reach you. To achieve this goal, the lone survivor must complete some tasks with minimal resources. It is inevitable, in trying to do these tasks, that something will go wrong, that something will happen beyond the person's control, and that with one's life at stake, every mistake is magnified in terms of its importance. Thus, sooner or later, a lone survivor will have to cope with frustration when a few of their plans run into trouble. One outgrowth of this frustration is anger. There are many events in a survival situation that can frustrate or anger a person. Getting lost, damaged or forgotten equipment, the weather, inhospitable terrain, the enemy patrols, and physical limitations are just a few sources of frustration and anger. Frustration and anger encourage impulsive reactions, irrational behavior, poorly thought-out decisions, and in some instances, an "I quit" attitude. People sometimes avoid doing something they can't master. If the person can harness and properly channel the emotional intensity associated with anger and frustration, they can productively act as he answers the challenges of survival. If the lone survivor does not properly focus their angry feelings, they can waste much energy in activities that do little to further either his chances of survival or the chances of those around them. Depression, it would be a rare person indeed who would not get sad, at least momentarily, when faced with the privations of survival. As this sadness deepens, we label the feeling depression. Depression is closely linked with frustration and anger. The frustrated person becomes more and more angry as he fails to reach his goals. If the anger does not help the person to succeed, then the frustration level goes even higher. A destructive cycle between anger and frustration continues until the person becomes worn down, physically, emotionally, and mentally. When a person reaches this point, he starts to give up, and his focus shifts from, "What can I do?" to, "There is nothing I can do." Depression is an expression of this hopeless, helpless feeling. There is nothing wrong with being sad as you temporarily think about your loved ones and remember what life is like back in civilization or the world. Such thoughts, in fact, can give you the desire to try harder and live one more day. On the other hand, if you allow yourself to sink into a depressed state, then it can sap all your energy and, more important, your will to survive. It is imperative that each person resist succumbing to depression, loneliness, and boredom. Man is a social animal. This means we as human beings enjoy the company of others. Very few people want to be alone all the time. As you are aware, there is a distinct chance of isolation in a survival setting. This is not bad. Loneliness and boredom can bring to the surface qualities you thought only others had. The extent of your imagination and creativity may surprise you. When required to do so, you may discover some hidden talents and abilities. Most of all, you may tap into a reservoir of inner strength and fortitude you never knew you had. Conversely, loneliness and boredom can be another source of depression. As a person surviving alone or with others, you must find ways to keep your mind productively occupied. Additionally, you must develop a degree of self-sufficiency. You must have faith in your capability to go it alone. Guilt, the circumstances leading to your being in a survival setting, are sometimes dramatic and tragic. It may be the result of an accident or cataclysm where there was a loss of life. Perhaps you were the only or one of a few survivors. While naturally relieved to be alive, you simultaneously may be mourning the deaths of others who were less fortunate. It is not uncommon for survivors to feel guilty about being spared from death while others were not. This feeling, when used in a positive way, has encouraged people to try harder to survive with the belief they were allowed to live for some greater purpose in life. Sometimes, survivors tried to stay alive so that they could carry on the work of those killed. Whatever reason you give yourself, do not let guilt feelings prevent you from living. The living who abandon their chance to survive accomplish nothing. Such an act would be the greatest tragedy. Know yourself. Through training, family, and friends, take the time to discover who you are on the inside. Strengthen your stronger qualities and develop the areas that you know are necessary to survive. Anticipate fears. Don't pretend that you will have no fears. Begin thinking about what would frighten you the most if forced to survive alone. Train in those areas of concern to you. The goal is not to eliminate the fear, but to build confidence in your ability to function despite your fears. Be realistic. Don't be afraid to make an honest appraisal of situations. See circumstances as they are, not as you want them to be. Keep your hopes and expectations within the estimate of the situation. When you go into a survival setting with unrealistic expectations, you may be laying the groundwork for bitter disappointment. Follow the adage, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. It's much easier to adjust to pleasant surprises about one's unexpected good fortunes than to be upset by one's unexpected harsh circumstances. Adopt a positive attitude. Learn to see the potential good in everything. Looking for the good not only boosts morale, it also is excellent for exercising your imagination and creativity. Remind yourself, what is at stake? Remember, failure to prepare yourself psychologically to cope with survival leads to reactions such as depression, carelessness, inattention, loss of confidence, poor decision-making, and giving up before the body gives in. At stake is your life and the lives of others who are depending on you to do your share. Train through training and life experiences. Begin today to prepare yourself to cope with the rigors of survival. Demonstrating your skills in training will give you the confidence to call upon them should the need arise. Remember, the more realistic the training, the less overwhelming an actual survival setting will be. Learn stress management techniques. People under stress have a potential to panic if they are not well trained and not prepared psychologically to face whatever the circumstances may be. While we often cannot control the survival circumstances in which we find ourselves, it is within our ability to control our response to those circumstances. Learning stress management techniques can enhance significantly your capability to remain calm and focused as you work to keep yourself and others alive. A few good techniques to develop include relaxation skills, time management skills, assertiveness skills, and cognitive restructuring skills. The ability to control how you view a situation. Remember, the will to survive can also be considered to be the refusal to give up.